Live from a NASCAR bunker in Kyle's parents' basement, it's Turn the Radio Off with Mike Parsons and Kyle Bauer.
Become a fan at Facebook.com/TTRO Show. Follow along on Twitter.com/TTRO Show. Or just listen right now. It's Turn the Radio Off.
Well, Kyle, I spent the last week or so the same way most people have, curled up in a fetal position trying to make sense out of this world over the weekend. And then Monday I downloaded Pokemon Go. And moved on with my life, and I'm having a surprisingly good time with it. I've never been into the Pokemans, Kyle, but I see the kids. There's all these damn kids standing on and around my lawn, and after my anger subsided, I decided Chelsea from upstairs and I decided to download the app, and it's a fun diversion.
There was a person on my front lawn today that I thought was playing Pokemon Go, but it turns out they were just homeless and begging.
Right. And he said, "Fetch me a Pikachu, and I shall give you a shilling."
Another downside of living on a service drive, but that wasn't my choice. Anyway, yeah, Pokemon Go, I have no interest.
Well, here's the thing, Kyle.
Zero, and I won't. Like, maybe if I had more little kids to entertain, maybe I download it for them. But And I'm not saying, like, adults can play it if they want. I'm just saying I'm not.
Well, you're the exception to the rule, Kyle.
Not
because,
interested.
And obviously I'm stalling because the world's a terrible place, and we're going to have to spend most of the show talking about it. But here's a minor annoyance. As I ignore the elephant in the room and talk about Pokemon Go. You said it a few weeks ago when we were talking about Chewbacca Mom. People can't have no opinion on something. They have to have an extreme opinion. So I've noticed that...
and that gives people like Chewbacca Mom license to latch themselves on to some current events.
Right. But, I mean, if you don't want to play Pokemon Go... Just like not seeing the new Ghostbusters movie, just don't play it. You don't have to. You don't have to like shit on everything that is popular that you're not into.
There was only one thing about this Pokemon Go phenomenon that annoyed me. That like actually made the meter tick in one direction or another for me.
What's that?
Was I follow old CBC News on Twitter.
Okay.
Because the Canadians, it's they number one source of news for Canada. Want to know what's going on with them? Anyway, they had a millennial explain the Pokemon Go phenomenon.
Okay. Well, that's who's playing, I guess. And or young. I don't. What's the generation younger than millennials?
I don't know, but they probably won't be around to see it come to fruition with the way we're headed.
Right.
But, I don't know what the hell that is teens and preteens are called. Well, anyway, though, it was just really obnoxious and, like, dumb, and I don't know. Well, I was just annoyed by it, like in that one instance. Otherwise, I'm fine with it.
Yeah. Well, here's what's good about Pokemon Go. Okay, and I've never played Pokemon in my life, but number one, it tricks people into going outside. It gets people talking to each other. And Kyle, you know how you and I used to just drive around for S's and G's?
Yeah.
I think if you gave Pokemon Go a go, you'd like it. But I'm not going to pressure you because, look, I'm at the age where I don't care what other people do. All right, if you're doing something that I'm not into, I don't give a shit. I don't need to post a whole bunch of memes talking about how stupid it is. Normally, I just ignore it and do something else.
Well, again, everybody has to have an opinion on everything. Nobody can leave anything alone. They got to be on one side or the other, and they got to let everyone know.
Yeah. Has anyone ever asked you your opinion on something you were indifferent on, expecting you to have a hot take?
Chewbacca Mom.
Oh, yeah. That's right. I wasn't really disappointed.
And, I mean, I guess if, like, somebody, like, I guess Pokemon Go now, I'm sure there's been other things in the past. I used to be a lot more hot-takey than I am now.
Yeah.
But I still have my moments.
Well, you know what? Paul's expecting some hot takes from us this week because, as I said at the beginning of the show, a lot of terrible things happened this past week.
Actually, I might get pretty hot takey this episode. We'll see.
Maybe. Well, I mean, look, it started last Wednesday with the Alton Sterling shooting in Baton Rouge, where there was a man outside, Alton Sterling, selling CDs. There's reports that a homeless man called and said that he was out there threatening people. All we know is what we saw in the video, where he was tackled to the ground and he was shot by police. The interesting thing about the Alton Sterling video is that it's very abstract in the sense that it seems like, based on what you believe happened, it can be proven, right? Like you watch it, and when I watch it, it doesn't look like he's a threat. And it doesn't look like he's reaching for his pocket. But there's a police officer who very demonstrably yells, "He's got a gun," before shooting him. And I watched the video from both angles, and to me, it didn't look like he was an inherent threat. And then you get the Facebook Live video, Philando Castillo out there in suburban Minneapolis, where the video starts after he was shot. And you don't really know what happened before, but there was a police officer there sounding very panicky and very upset because, well, he just shot a guy. But
or the 4-year-old in the back seat, by the way.
I didn't get that far in the video. I had to turn
I didn't
it
get
off.
that far in the video, but I can believe the report that there was a 4-year-old in the back seat.
Oh, it's on there. It's on there because I saw the clip. But, I mean, I watched the first. And then the day after, of course, there was the protest that started peacefully and ended in violence when a sniper took out 5 Dallas police officers. And Kyle, I said this to you before the show. I don't even know where I want to go with this because I don't even know what the conversation's about. I don't know what's more terrifying. Seeing these videos of these people being shot by police who don't seem to pose an immediate threat, or the thought of police officers being picked out of nowhere. They're both tragedies. They're both terrifying, and they're tragic. And the way that we have kind of taken this conversation, my brain's scrambled. And I think a lot of people's brains are scrambled because 3 terrible things happen on consecutive days, and we don't know what to do with our emotions.
And I think it's interesting because, from the black community, which is hard for me to comment on because, of course, I'm not, fully ingrained in, but,
right.
But some of the outside opinions I've seen have really doubled down on their views of police officers in the wake of this. Of course, there's been a lot of reported threats. You can take them for what they are, whether it's the police trying to drum up more sentiment for themselves. I could buy into that conspiracy theory, but there's even other conspiracy theories floating around out there that that they just plucked some black guy and they propped him up there to say, oh, this is who did it. It was somebody who was a black radical, and it was somebody who and I also, and then I'll just cut over to the white side of it. To the white side, you're seeing police officers get in free to so-and-so minor league baseball game. You're seeing so-and-so bake pies and cakes and flowers and bring them to their local police department. You're hearing little Aiden Braden Caden Jr. Having a lemonade stand set up for police officers. And so on the white end, you're seeing all this, kind of reaffirmation that we are 100% behind the police. And you're seeing the black community really, really becoming indignant and saying that they don't necessarily trust the reports of how exactly things went down in Dallas, that they have become so fearful and they've become so bitter and so enraged that if you were expecting everyone to cross over to the side, well, we're going to use this as a unifying moment. No, I think it's going to, as time goes on, it'll be a further divisive moment.
I'm going to take the reports from Dallas for what they are. And
I will too. Yeah. I don't think they would have that much of a fabrication, but there are people out there who are already floating around conspiracy theories.
Well, sure. I mean, you see the memes how how come anytime there's corruption in politics, something terrible happens? Coincidence? Well, not really, because corruption and terrible things happen all the time. It's like celebrity deaths. People, when a celebrity everyone knows dies, they start paying attention. They start saying, "Oh, these happens in threes. First, it's." First it's Michael Jackson, and then it's Farrah Fawcett, and then it's the puppeteer guy from Star Wars. See, it happens in threes. It's just, you're just paying attention, and you notice coincidences, but these things happen all the time. One thing I know for sure is that I think that this is probably the most divisive. I don't know if it's an issue, but I would say these last 5 days have been the most divisive that I have seen this country. And I think you could say the shit has hit the fan. And you know what? What's tragic about these shootings in Dallas, except for the fact that 5 police officers were killed, and from all accounts, this rally was peaceful, and the police officers in Dallas, there were pictures of protesters and police officers together, but it seemed like Philando Castillo could have been a turning point.
Yes.
Because this is why. Philando Castillo, he was carrying legally, and a lot of people who seem to brush off reports of police officers using excessive force were starting to say, wait a second. Okay, this guy is legally carrying. He tells the police officer, according to reports, that he has a gun, that he's legally carrying, and that he's reaching for his ID. The police officer gets squirrely and shoots him, and a lot of people who are pro legal carrying were starting to get angry. And I think that if these events in Dallas didn't turn people's anger into another direction, that could have been a turning point. And the shooter in Dallas. The shooter in Dallas took that away.
Unfortunately, it ended up being a turning point for one very demented and mentally damaged person who decided to take matters into his own hands, he believed. And now we have sentiments flipping back towards police officers when I believe that they were there all along, if you talk to a majority of people.
And like I said, for the most part, I think they're deserved, because we say it all the time, Kyle, and you ask me if I'm getting sick of saying it, and I am. But obviously, I look, this discussion is getting out of control. People are saying, well, police officers don't leave the house every day saying I'm going to kill a black person. No, of course not. But you know where I see the inequities breaking down? In the court system, where the officers who shoot Tamir Rice, a 13-year-old in Cleveland, they walk. You see video of corrupt police officers shooting a guy who's walking away from them. Those guys walk. I think that's where you see the inequities.
Yeah. And also the Freddie Gray case. In the midst of all this, everyone has been acquitted in the Freddie Gray case.
But look, really what the conversation should be, well, I'm not going to say what the conversation should be, but what nobody's talking about here, because we're going off in all these directions, was Alton Sterling a threat to the police officers at the time he was shot? Was Philando Castillo a threat to these police officers at the time they were shot? And a lot of people are saying this. Why can't the good cops say, okay, that's a cop doing a bad job? That's not what our profession's about. And I'm not here to criticize police officers, because look, it's true. I have no idea what they go through. But I think cops acting irresponsibly put good cops in risk because they have to do crowd control. They have to they have to go out and maintain order in riots. And another thing, and I guess I'm guilty of this here, Kyle, because I'm stream of consciousness right now. But it's just everything I've been seeing. It seems like the conversation has gone from here to a million different directions in a million different miles, and I can't follow it. I can't even follow it because, like I said, the core issue here is, were these guys who were shot a threat to these police officers at the time they were shot? That should be the core discussion.
They weren't, and especially with Philando Castile, it was. You really hit on something about him being a legal gun owner. Because with the Alton Sterling thing, when I was listening to all the fallout from that, you were getting every middle-aged white Ron and Jerry calling up from Trenton saying, well, if that guy in Baton Rouge, why did he have a gun on him?
Right.
He should have had his gun registered. He should have let him know right away that he had one.
Or if he didn't resist, then he wouldn't have gotten shot.
But that's what Philando Castile did the next day. Right. And I was thinking, of course, you don't want to see any of this happen to begin with, but I was thinking with Philando Castile, this is going to be the first one that was not in vain. That's what I was thinking.
Right.
I was thinking this was going to change the whole conversation because you can't get around it. Everything about that was abhorrent. There was no way. The only way that there was that and all the white supremacists out there and all the neocons were searching as hard as they could. All they could do was make up a lie built around the whole robbery suspect thing.
Right.
And then I also saw some awful lie going around that Philando Castile was a pedophile. The same thing. They said that both about Castile and Alton Sterling. I was seeing all these white supremacists passing around, oh, you need to know the truth. They were both pedophiles. Well, how the hell would Philando Castile, who was a unionized worker in a school district there, how the hell would he be able to get a job if that were true? That's how blatant and how desperate the lies were getting to, again, excuse a police officer shooting a black man who was posing zero threat other than the color of his skin and having a wide nose.
Right. Well, and I think that
they were cornered, and then this happened.
Right.
The Dallas thing happened, and that blew all the sentiment back towards how about Blue Lives Matter too?
Right. Here's the thing:
Blue Lives Matter.
Right.
Fuck, we know Blue Lives Matter. You know how we know Blue Lives Matter? Because they have the authority to pull us over. Because they have the authority to enforce laws. Because in that sense, blue lives are omnipotent.
Right.
They are. They can control and they can dictate all around us. A police officer can ruin your life if he or she wants to. Do they often? No, of course not. But can they? Yes, they can. They have that power. No one ever questioned the power and the authority of a police officer.
Right.
No one ever did. So get out of here with that fucking Blue Lives Matter shit.
Well,
nothing but a bunch of regressive BS. That's all it is. All it is a bunch of racist, regressive BS that completely misses the point of anything anybody should be talking about right now.
I wouldn't call it all racist because a lot of people who are posting that
I'm tired of making excuses for people's ignorance, Mike. I'm tired of it. Because we are too far down the tracks of all this shit that's gone on since in the past 4 years. Well, we're too far down the tracks. There's no excuse anymore.
That's fine. Let me give you an alternate viewpoint. The only people who I kind of understand posting that are, look, I have a lot of police officers' wives.
Blue Lives Matter.
On my Facebook page. And I can kind of...
Good for them. They got a pension to look forward to.
Well, okay. I mean, look... Let's bring this to some civil. I know you're pissed off here, Kyle, but look, so I can understand those people being concerned, and I'm not saying they're right. I think they're misguided, but I can understand.
Then take some accountability and cut the propaganda. Look at things objectively.
But I think you're right. Because what happens is there are these publications out there who whenever something like this happens, they say, hey, find something that might kind of excuse this. And this is where we start veering away from the core discussion as to, was Philando Castillo a threat? Was Alton Sterling a threat at the time it happened? Now, they started posting Alton Sterling's criminal record, which, look, okay, that happened. But does that have anything to do with whether or not he was a threat at the time that he was shot? Philando Castillo, you're bringing it up. I saw this headline. Philando Castillo was a shooting suspect. Was a shooting suspect when he was pulled over, and people are posting, see, you got to get all the facts. Well, okay, talk about getting all the facts. Reread that transcript. Re-listen to that audio. The police officer said he looked like a suspect. He wasn't a suspect. He looked like a suspect. And even if he was the suspect, that doesn't matter, because you have to look at, was he a threat to the police officer at the time he was shot? That's what we should be focused. That's the main thing we should be focusing on right now. And then we can decide whether it's justified or not, which it doesn't look like it. And then we can have the bigger conversations. But what happens is people have said, here's something that threatens my worldview or my preconceived notions. And whatever preconceived notion you have, you can find it out there on the internet. But facts are facts. And the fact is, right now, it doesn't look like either one of those two men who were shot were threats to those police officers. And I think that there's nothing anti-police about saying that these police officers were wrong. And when a police officer is wrong, just like any other citizen, he needs to face legal repercussions.
True. And maybe the police officer in Minnesota will, but I doubt the police officers in Baton Rouge will.
Yeah.
And think about how many of these cases, Chicago, Baltimore, other than the university campus police officer or the police officer in South Carolina, we've seen pretty much every other police officer, Eric Garner's included, which was caught on tape.
Right.
It was all right there for us to see. That police officer still walked.
Right. And you know what? That police officer, he didn't mean to kill him, but guess what?
That's still manslaughter.
Exactly. They used excessive force and they were culpable in his death. That's manslaughter.
If I get drunk and drive and kill someone, I didn't mean to kill that person. I was just being an idiot. This police officer didn't mean to kill Eric Garner, but he was using excessive force.
Right.
For no reason.
Right. Other than, he was mouthing off to him.
I get charged. I get sentenced.
Yeah.
I go to prison.
Right.
What happened to that police officer? That's what I'm saying. Don't give me this Blue Lives Matter crap.
Well,
because they do matter. We know they matter. They matter more than my life. They matter more than your life. And they certainly matter more than anybody who's black. And that's what this conversation should be about. Well, and that's the problem.
And to have conversations about race, we as white folks, we have to not feel offended when the idea that racism still exists is entered into a conversation. Because what happens is a lot of us white folks, whenever start saying, hey, does racism exist? No, because I think people feel like they're being called racists. You and I say, probably. I'm not black. I don't know how, I don't know who's persecuted against. It makes sense. It's a possibility, and then go from there. But people need to stop.
I say it is. There's no maybe about it. In the events that we've seen in the past few years, there's no question in my mind. It's all right there in front of us, and people just don't want to accept it. And they can go ahead and continue to shout, all lives matter, blue lives matter, come up with whatever lie, propaganda, slander against these victims' families, against these victims that they can come up with. But it doesn't change the fact of what happened. Yes, it's terrible that those police officers in Dallas were shot, and killed in the line of duty. I'm not arguing that it was justified.
No, it's absolutely not.
But here's the problem, Mike. You have to throw out those platitudes,
right?
We have to keep somebody for. There has to be a disclaimer in front of because some asshole with the Blue Lives Matter Facebook profile pic and an NRA hat on is going to jump all over your ass and say, "Oh, you want to see police officers get shot? Right. They defend and protect you." No, the problem is that they're not defending and protecting everyone. Those Dallas police officers who passed away, they may have very well been excellent police officers, and the Dallas police was used exemplary as a force that believed in community engagement, that believed in improving race relations, making it a priority, getting to know the public that they are serving. Problem is, how many? You think the Baton Rouge police have that kind of perspective on things?
Right.
No.
Right. So you should. The question is, how do we take what they're doing with Dallas and make that the norm?
Right.
And you know what, Kyle? I don't know the statistics. Maybe it is the norm. But you know what? Like I said, one of these events is too many. Okay, and when it happens, I just want whoever does it to be held to the same standard as anyone else.
Exactly.
That's it.
That's all. That's justice. That's equality.
Let's take a quick break because there's one more final thought I have on this, and I don't know if you have any more thoughts on this, but if we don't take a break now, we're going to do a 40-minute segment. So I'm going to take a quick break, and we're going to come back. It's Turn the Radio Off on the Internet.
Less rock, more talk. Turn the radio off. Become a fan at peoplehatemypodcast.com.
I don't know just why they wanted to call this a confession. I certainly don't feel guilty about being a Republican. I've always been a Republican. My father is, his father was. The whole family is a Republican family. I voted for Dwight Eisenhower the first time I ever voted. I voted for Nixon the last time. But when we come to Senator Goldwater, now it seems to me we're up against a very different kind of a man. This man scares me. Now, maybe I'm wrong. A friend of mine has said to me, listen, just because a man sounds a little irresponsible during a campaign doesn't mean he's going to act irresponsibly. You know that theory, that the White House makes the man. I don't buy that. You know what I think makes a president? I mean, aside from his judgment, his experience, are the men behind him, his advisors, the cabinet. And so many men with strange ideas are working for Goldwater. You'll hear a lot about what these guys are against. They seem to be against just about everything, but what are they for? The hardest thing for me about this whole campaign is to sort out one Goldwater statement from another. A reporter will go to Senator Goldwater and he'll say, Senator, on such and such a day you said, and I quote, blah, 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 whatever it is, end quote. And then Goldwater says, well, I wouldn't put it that way. I can't follow that. Was he serious when he did put it that way? Is he serious when he says he wouldn't put it that way? I just don't get it. A president ought to mean what he says.
Switch off the radio. Turn off the radio. Shut down your radio system.
We'll do it live.
What?
I'll write it and we'll do it live.
Turn the radio off. There you go. I'm drunk.
All right, Kyle, so if there's any final thoughts on this whole week that was, you can get to them in this segment. But you know what? These terrible events have helped me make a decision that I've been wrestling with for a while. And we talked about it extensively on the show. The whole transgendered bathrooms and locker rooms thing. Mm-hmm. And where I was with it is like, look, the bathroom should be a non-issue, right? Because you're in a stall, nobody knows. The locker room, I haven't quite made up my mind on it. But you know what? These three events, well, four too, if you count the terrible courtroom shooting in Berrien County. Look, these events have shown me that fear, misunderstanding of other people is way more dangerous than any hypothetical situation that someone may find themselves in sharing a bathroom or a locker room with a transgendered person. And I'm trying not to sound all shiny, happy people, but I think changing starts with you individually, each person individually. It's not society has to change. Individuals in society have to change. And we have to choose acceptance, and we have to choose tolerance, and we have to check ourselves when we start having thoughts about other people that are stereotypical. So, the Orlando shooting, okay, that was caused by homophobia and perhaps Islamic extremism, but homophobia was definitely at the heart of it. These racial relations that we're having right now, it's caused by one side being fearful of another side, and that needs to stop. So I'm thinking to myself, look, okay, being afraid of each other has proven to be much more dangerous than sharing a locker room with someone who's transgendered or someone who decides not to subscribe to the gender that they were born with. So you know what? That's where I fall on it. Choose acceptance and choose understanding. And if you don't understand, strive to understand and keep an open mind because the opposite way is killing us. Mike, if that made sense.
No, Mike, that was a great message. For me, Trayvon Martin shifted the paradigm. It brought police brutality. It brought injustice. It brought the basically poaching of black men into light on a social media level. And one of the reasons why everyone is now taking out their phones and there's a cry for body cams and stuff is because injustice has come about. Murky evidence has come about, and so many police officers have been exonerated after seemingly doing something heinous or something in either incompetence or cold blood, one or the other. Okay, or fear, which I guess can tie into the cold blood or incompetence. But the point is, we've reached another paradigm shift. We had the ability to take something like the Philando Castile incident and say, this is the one that won't be in vain. This is the one that forces change. And instead, we have 5 police officers murdered, assassinated, and it's sad because it just resets everything to the point where now I think we're divided even further than we were before the Castile and Sterling shootings.
You're absolutely right, because it seemed like Friday morning to Friday afternoon we were coming together. And then Dallas happens, and that psychopathic sniper just drove another wedge even deeper than what it was.
And now white folks are with a finger pointed in your face and a hand grabbing onto the collar of your shirt saying, you respect police, you appreciate police, police are your heroes, they're your unquestioned authorities, friends, and you can do nothing but trust them. You should bake them a cake and take it to your local police station. You should serve them ice-cold lemonade on a hot day and do it without any questions asked. And meanwhile, black people are still suffering. Black people are still shaken up. I'm not saying that the police aren't shaken up. Of course they are.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Both sides are shaken up.
But what I'm saying, Mike, is that where are the black people left in this? Where's the black community left in this? They're once again set further back than they were before. That's because, yes, blue lives matter. They matter more than black lives ever will. And that's the problem. That's what started all of this. That's what made this systemic. That's what institutionalized this type of behavior without accountability from police officers when it comes to black victims. So that's something that you have to consider. We are further back than where we were at the beginning of last week, when it looked like we could have made some progress, when it looked like there was some genuine outrage from everyone over Philando Castile. And now we're back to saying you're either blue lives matter or you're either black lives matter.
Right.
And lastly, I think the only way that we can ever reset and get back on course as a society is the same way that LBJ did it back in the 60s. He worked his ass off to get the civil rights movement passed, along with Medgar Evers, along with Martin Luther King, along with Malcolm X, and many other civil rights pioneers, and Jesse Jackson, too. I'm sure he'd be very upset if he found out that I didn't mention him there.
Yeah.
But the point is...
Well, he's still mad at you from last time because you guys have a personal relationship.
Is that they did all the legwork, they made the sacrifices, many of them sacrificed their lives, and LBJ was the one who finally got the country to put it into law. The civil rights movement and the civil rights bill mended things for a time. There were still tensions, but it mended things for a time. It corrected things for a time. We're going to need a bill passed, or we're going to need more legislation passed, or we're just going to need better policing, and we're going to need better community engagement from the police. And that's the only way, is if we have government interference, if we have government to intervene, that we're going to get things back on track in this country, or else it's going to continue to spiral out of control. We need change, and we need it legislatively, whether it be weapons, whether it be with police officers, whether it be the funding that they get for militarized weapons from Homeland Security. Whatever it is, we need to change. And this could be another paradigm shift, and it can either go real bad or it can either be a change for the better. Let's not make this loss of life this week in vain.
And you know, you're right, Kyle. I feel like we're on a fulcrum right now where we can tip either way to one side or another, you know, into more progress or backsliding. And what you just said there is something that I think I subconsciously knew, but until you put it into words, it didn't really hit me. Yes, we are further back than we were at this time last week. And I'm going to try to get my thoughts in order for you know, this final statement here, because it's been rattling around in my head for days. Look, we need police, obviously. People say they're the thin blue line between order and chaos. That's correct. And that's why it's so terrifying when it seems like they act irresponsibly and take a life from someone who wasn't a threat, especially Philando Castillo, who seemed like he was doing everything you were supposed to do at a traffic stop. Now, look, obviously, I know there's millions of traffic stops that happen around the country that come and go without incident. But that doesn't mean that we should let the ones that go wrong go by. And I think it should go without saying that when you criticize a police officer for doing a bad job, that, yes, you should respect police officers as long as they're respectful to you, and that, you know, you believe that most police officers are out there doing the job they're supposed to do. But that doesn't mean that you should blindly submit to authority. And I'm not saying be a pain in the ass when you see a police officer, but not just sit there and say, "Oh, well, okay, he's a police officer. He shot this guy, or you know, he roughed this person up, or he's harassing this group of people. He's a police officer. He's infallible." No, because human beings are human beings, right? And for every 1,000 good police officers out there, there's one out there doing a bad job and making them all look bad. And we shouldn't let that go. Just because there's a bunch of good ones out there doesn't mean that the bad ones should run roughshod. And that's all I'm saying. And that's all and that's all that's happening when you point out a police officer doing a bad job and getting a little too rough with somebody.
I like how there are so many white folks, including Rudy Giuliani, coming out and saying that the black community has to be responsible, that the fathers have to stick around, that there can't be so much black-on-black crime, right?
Here's the thing with black-on-black crime. You know why there's no marching or rioting over black-on-black crime?
Which actually there is in Chicago. They just never report it because then that would dampen a good hot take.
But when there's black-on-black crime, the person who commits the crime, they go to jail. They stand trial. And that's the thing. That's why people are getting so mad, because when a bad police officer goes rogue, it doesn't seem like he faces legal repercussions. And I think a lot of this could be avoided if the criminal justice system would just work the way it's supposed to. Regardless of the race of the victim, regardless of the profession of the suspect, if you just look at the facts and you treat every citizen in that courtroom equally, I think that a lot of this does not happen.
Yeah, exactly. And Giuliani says or calls for black people, for the black community to be accountable. Well, how about having police be accountable?
Right. How about everyone's accountable for their own actions?
They're the ones doing the killing. So how about they be accountable for their actions?
Right.
Let's stop putting it on civilians. Because police are supposed to be better than us, right? What does that saying go? Blank's finest.
Yeah.
Detroit's finest, Chicago's finest, New York's finest. So they're supposed to be better than us. So how about they be held accountable? How about they be held to a higher standard?
Right.
To keep that order from chaos. How about that? How about we start asking that question a little more often? And people like Rudy Giuliani and a lot of other white folks out there don't seem to want to ask that out of their police officers. And it's not just black people. There have been white people who have been shot unarmed. There was a case a couple years ago. There was a Down syndrome kid who was strangled to death by an off-duty police officer working as a security guard at the movie theater because he refused to leave the theater. He was just having a temper tantrum, something that I could have came in and probably handled effectively because I have been taught de-escalation. What about these police officers? Have they? So what I'm saying is that, get back to my point, it's predominantly black people. By a wide margin, it's predominantly black men. But sometimes it might be a white person. Sometimes it might be a special needs person. Some Latino people are often victims of police brutality and shootings. It could be anything. It could be anyone. So before you get on your pedestal and point the finger squarely at the black community for, I guess, antagonizing the police in your mind to behave so savagely, think. This could happen to anyone, and are you going to be making the same excuses when it happens to your nephew?
Right. And really, all we're asking is that you're held to the same standards of the law in which you're charged with enforcing.
Yeah, and hey, I've had, of course, I'm a somewhat clean-cut white kid with a good record. I've had a lot of good encounters with police officers, and I'm sure there's a lot of great police officers out there. Again, I feel I have to qualify that, even though I'm being redundant.
Right. I think we've said that about 7 times.
Yeah, because like I said, someone's waiting for the one time you slip up.
But you know what? If we were big enough for people at the Blaze to listen to us, all they would talk about would be our anti-police rant.
They would isolate that pension comment I made.
Yeah.
They would pull quote that.
It's funny. Sometimes when I'm listening to our show, I'm like, I said, theblaze.com would isolate that on Kyle. Breitbart.com would isolate that on Kyle.
but just it's the point remains. We just want accountability from police officers, and I will be happy to support the police officers in my community, but they got to support everyone else in the community at the same time.
You know what I'll end it with, Kyle? I'll end it, to the good police officers, thank you. To the people who let bad police officers walk, that's the problem.
And you're also, again, as you said, you're putting all the good police officers in danger.
Exactly. Let's turn the radio off on the internet.
Turn the radio off. With Mike Parsons.
No drug dealers living next to me. Pretty good deal.
Kyle Bauer.
Yeah.
People hate my podcast.com.
President Johnson, now, Johnson at least is talking about facts. He says, look, we got the tax cut bill, and because of that you get to carry home X number of dollars more every payday. We got the nuclear test ban, and because of that there's X% less radioactivity in the food. But Goldwater, often you can't, I can't figure out just what Goldwater means by the things he says. I read now where he says, a craven fear of death is sweeping across America. What is that supposed to mean? If he means that people don't want to fight a nuclear war, he's right. I don't. When I read some of these things that Goldwater says about total victory, I get a little worried, you know? I wish I was as sure that Goldwater is against war as I am that he's against some of these other things. I wish I could believe that he has the imagination to be able to just shut his eyes and picture what this country would look like after a nuclear war.
So much fun. It's scary. Become a fan on Facebook at www.ttroshow.com. It's Turn the Radio Off.
This is kind of weird, Kyle, but did you happen to catch the Calvin Johnson E60 interview?
I didn't, but I did hear enough sound from it that I can kind of gather, what he was saying and what it was.
Yeah, well, Michael Smith, I believe it's the guy who hosts the His and Her podcast with Jamel Hill. Michael Smith did a sit-down interview with Calvin Johnson, and the first thing that struck me was that Calvin Johnson was very candid and very personable, which you don't see a lot of celebrities, athletes being in interviews. And he was talking about, why he decided to retire from football because, his game was diminishing, but he was still one of the top receivers in the game, and he's still somewhat young. And he just decided to walk away from football. And it kind of gave me that, like, maybe he's not one of the top receivers left in the game. But he was still somewhat productive.
He put up good stats, but a lot of them are hollow.
Yeah. But
certainly wasn't the legendary player that he was.
Right,
and all those great 4-12 seasons Lions had.
Right, poor guy. Could you imagine being the best in your profession and stuck on?
I know one other person who experienced that, and he retired kind of early, too.
Are you talking about Barry Sanders?
Of course.
Well, it's funny because it seems like people were much more angry with Barry Sanders than Calvin Johnson.
It was the timing, and also it was the timing right before training camp and how he did it with the facts, and also it was the era, too. I mean, I think people today are more sympathetic towards the abuse NFL players take than they were in 1999.
Right, because you're hearing more about the effect on the body. And Calvin Johnson essentially said, look, I'm 30 years old. I can't walk. And I want to have a life after football. And, I was listening to this, and I said, what? This is a guy who's got his priorities straight. There was a time where it seemed like you were expected to die for your football team, right? If you got a concussion, here's some smelling salt, go back out there. And then I thought back to discussions we've had about him on the show, and I felt kind of guilty because, there's been times where I've called him kind of soft and said that he lacked the killer instinct to be a great NFL football player, NFL wide receiver, in my uneducated opinion. But then I'm listening to him and just talking about how, he'd go out there and his entire body would be in pain. And maybe that's why he didn't go 100% over the middle.
Oh, and also maybe that's why, remember that play in Seattle last year where he had the ball stripped on the goal line, costing the Lions the game. Maybe that was because of the rough shape his fingers were in.
Right.
I mean, he had a couple fingers that were completely crooked.
Yeah.
That wouldn't reset properly, and that would affect your ability to grip a football.
Yeah. I mean, really, his entire body was in agony the whole time he was playing. I mean, he'd have to go to the trainer before the game and get shot up with as many legal medications as he could. And I went from saying, okay, Calvin Johnson was always kind of overrated to, you know what? Here's a very smart man who's got it in perspective. And he's thinking of his future after football. He's a football player, but football doesn't define him, and he knew when it was time to walk away. So I guess I'm issuing a retraction and an apology, even though I'm sure Calvin Johnson has no idea that we exist. I'm here to say I was wrong.
And I should issue an apology too, because I've gotten very hot takey about some of his late game failures as well in recent years with the Lions. But with Calvin, I think one thing that I'm actually going to defend the Lions for a second here and remove some cynicism. So this is going to be very tough for me, but let me take a deep breath. Okay. I don't believe the Lions' futility had anything to do with him retiring right now. If he really wanted to play another season with a competitive team, I believe that he would have held out and made demands until they traded him or figured out a way to move his contract because, one, the Lions have always treated their players very well. Typically, there have been a few rough instances here or there, but typically they've treated their players well, and I think they would have adhered to Calvin's wishes, especially with all that he's done for the franchise over the past 9 years, 9 seasons. So I think they would have moved him if he really wanted to play another season. I think he would have, and the Lions would have gotten something for him, and they would have worked that out to get some. Well, so I don't buy that it was all the Lions leading to him to retire after 9 seasons.
That came up in the interview. Michael Smith asked him, so if. Is there a possibility you take a year off and you come back to a contender? And Calvin Johnson just sincerely sounded like a guy who was done with football. It's like, no, I'm done playing football. And he put that to rest. So I think you're right. But we only have a little bit of time left here, Kyle, in the show. And you're probably more familiar with the specifics of this than I am. More fallout from the Penn State sexual assault scandal today, as some court documents were unsealed, and the details are just stomach turning.
Yes, and it goes back to what I felt when all this came out in late 2011.
Yeah, first, what was uncovered? Well, that Joe Paterno knew about this since, the mid-'70s, and he did nothing about it. He knew about Jerry Sandusky molesting kids at his football camps on Penn State campus since the mid-'70s.
Well, yeah, there was that, of course. But what was known was that not only Joe Paterno, but several assistants, including Greg Schiano, former Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Rutgers head coach. He's now a defensive coordinator at Ohio State. He was among the most notable
names,
assistants that came out after this testimony was released that he knew. He, of course, denied it today.
Of course.
But it's testimony. So who would really lie about this is what I want to know. And it goes back to a simple point that I have made from the second I heard about initially heard about the depth and the serial nature of what Sandusky had done, and just applying some common sense that Paterno had to have known about it at some point, that Penn State's football program should get the death penalty. I don't care about the current football players. They are Division I NCAA athletes. They will get transfers. They will live. I say the years upon years upon years and the generations of cyclical damage that Sandusky has done to vulnerable, at-risk youth. He was doing this to children in shelters.
In a weakened position.
He was doing this to who were intentionally in a vulnerable position. He preyed on them.
Who had nobody advocating for them.
Like a true calculated predator. And this entire program, due to lack of institutional control, sat idly by for the sake of winning football games and allowed children to continue to be raped. And you're going to tell me that this program shouldn't be nuclear bombed? It should be leveled to the fucking ground, and then they should dig a 30-foot hole for the remains of it to rest in. Because I am sick of the excuses being made. I'm sick of these NCAA football programs running roughshod over the law. And I'm sick of the lack of institutional control in all these programs. We see Ole Miss. They're trying to pay players and trying to compensate them and give money to impoverished people.
which is victimless.
This is their only ticket out.
Yeah.
And Ole Miss is getting punished for that,
right.
getting sanctions, but Penn State covers up child rape.
Right.
And I have to listen to these blowhards on Grantland back when that existed, on Slate, on Deadspin, and etc. Write these think pieces, turning up their nose and saying, oh, how dare you victimize the students and the football players
right.
of Penn State.
Right, what about the kids, you idiot?
Yeah, what about the actual victims in this? There's real victims in this, and that's why that program should be shot to hell.
You're right. Here's the thing, okay? College football is getting too big for its britches when stuff like this happens, when the rape cover-ups at Baylor happen. And, Kyle, you're right. The death penalty is needed in situations like this as a deterrent. They need to see these harsh penalties when there is a human cost.
To say, get control of your fucking program.
Exactly. An example needs to be made. And I'm not normally an example needs to be made guy, but if you're in a world where child rape and rape of girls on campus is allowed as long as you're winning, that's an example that needs to be made. So if you, like you said, Kyle, if you nuke these football programs, everyone else is going to be on the up and up because now there's a lot at stake.
Because they got to correct themselves. An independent investigation should be relaunched into the Baylor situation, into Penn State. And listen, I don't care if these are ghosts of Penn State's football program leading to a reckoning on the current staff, players, and students.
You know what it says? If you don't have your shit in order, get it in order because you may get away with it now, but 30 years from now, if it's uncovered, you're done.
And there's a cultural issue with that too. That just last week, 200 former Penn State players came out with a petition to get Joe Pa's statue raised once again.
Yeah, hand me that petition. I'll sign it with my lighter.
And seriously, that tells you that there is a cultural problem here. It's rape culture.
Right.
Whether the victims be 13-year-old boys or 19-year-old girls, whether it be Baylor or Penn State, this is sexual assault not being taken seriously with the weight that it deserves to be taken. And think of SMU. That's the only program
that got the death penalty.
Why? Because they gave Eric Dickerson a Trans Am. That's why.
Right.
Seriously, think about that.
Right. You added to somebody's life, where Penn State destroyed many lives.
And I think back and I wonder about all the people who authored those think pieces saying that the sanctions against Penn State were overboard, that these players are being made the victim because of Jerry Sandusky's transgressions. He raped children in the program that those players chose to play for. They all had the option of transferring. Some of them did. Most of them stayed. Yeah. That program, they wanted to affiliate themselves with that. So maybe they needed to crack up the skull, and be forced to transfer anyway.
I can't disagree with anything you said there, Kyle, which is good because we're out of time. So we won't be back next week because I'm on vacation.
Okay.
Be back in 2 weeks. Thanks for listening, Paul. Bye.